In this video, what we're going to do is walk through how to create a HTML site using the box model. And so what we're going to do is just go to the class website, we're going to download the files, and then we're going to take a look at our box model finish tutorial just to give you guys an idea of what we're looking at. So let's do that first. So I've come to the class website. You can download your tutorial files by clicking box model tutorial files, and then let's look at what this looks like when you are finished. What we are going to be doing is creating what we call boxes, and this is allowing us to really create custom styles and add different colors and background colors, add images, and eventually videos to these types of areas. And it also helps us to organize our site. So this is our finished product. I know it's not the most beautiful thing, but it helps us to demonstrate how some of these rules work and how to start dividing content. You might also notice that our navigation is starting to look more like navigation. And we also can link to specific areas within our website to help add organization to our site, etc. So I'm going to come back over here and go ahead and download these tutorial files. When you open this up, make sure that you're putting it on your desktop. I wouldn't leave it in your downloads. So I'm going to go over to my desktop and find my websites folder, and I'm just going to drop it there. When I open this up, what I'm able to see is that there's already an index page that's already been started for you, and then there's a couple of images for your site. Okay, so once you have those downloaded, what we're going to do is just create a new site like we have done the last couple of times. So coming up to Dreamweaver site, new site, and I'm just going to name this box model tutorial. Find my root folder on my desktop. And I'm going to click on my tutorial files and click save. And then you'll notice that your files panel will repopulate with the images that we just talked about, as well as your index page. And go ahead and open up that index page. And really the only thing that is in here is a title of our document title. And remember, on our site, your document title, okay, is just what will pop up at the start of your website. So if we're looking at our tutorial, what it just says is box model example in that tab area. That's our document title. There's also just a comment, and a comment is just some chunk of code, okay, using these little comment functions, okay, this one and this one. And what it means is it's a comment to yourself. And it just, in this case, make sure all of your content goes into the body section. You always want to make sure whatever you want on your page is showing up in there. And their comments, what they're used for, are just notes to yourself. It could be notes to another web designer who might be coming in here later, but it's not going to be showing up, like we don't see anything right here. So it's just kind of something to help you to organize yourself if you need that. So I just wanted to show you what that was. So what we're going to get at first is how to develop your header area. You know, on the class website, it's that large image. Some websites, it's a whole bunch of color, like in this example. But we're just going to start creating our header and creating that first box, okay? So using our instruction sheets, I know that the header is just right here. And how you do this, you can write header. And a really great function in Dreamweaver is you can manually type in that code, but a speed way to do this is you're going to type the word header and then press tab, and it'll already populate that code. Within your header, what you're going to then create is your H1, and I'm just going to write header, and then you're going to make some paragraph text. Okay. Another great tip is we're going to use what we call lorem ipsum, which is just, I don't know, it's just placeholder text. And Dreamweaver can help you out with that as well. What you type is lorem and then however many words that you want. And so you type lorem 20, and I'm going to get 20 characters of word and press tab, and it'll automatically populate some placeholder text for you. So this just helps us to kind of move through practicing with some things without having to type out really long sentences of whatever it might be. So what we have just created is our first box. And as I start kind of clicking around, I see paragraph, I see header, in this area and all of this information. As I selected on my header area, Dreamweaver has selected that. What this means is everything enclosed in this area is going to be considered our header. Now, the fun part is in using these boxes is when we go to our CSS sheets. So let's go ahead and create a new CSS style. So I'm going to come up to my CSS designer. I'm going to click sources, create a new style sheet, and I'm going to click browse. Just make sure that I am in the right place. And I am in my CSS box model tutorial with save as styles, and I'm going to click save, and I'm going to click OK. And as we know, we'll have our source code, and then we'll have our style sheet. What we can do is we can add the code to basically create the styles for our header. And so to do so, we're just going to type it in like we did with our text codes that we did last week. And we are going to add these various different properties that are written on our website. The first thing that we're going to add is background color. And within the header area, what we are indicating the background color is going to be is, as we're going to see in a second, it will then fill in the color in that header area specifically. So it's not doing our whole website, it's just doing that header area. You can also specify what exactly you want your font colors to be. And in this case, what that means is this is our foreground color. So foreground means our text, and I just added a color of white. What we can also do working with our boxes is start to manipulate aspects such as our margin, such as our padding, etc. And so here I'm just going to add a margin of 50 pixels. And what that means, and we saw this jump, and I'm going to delete this and restart it so you can see, is that it pushed the box away from everything else by 50 pixels. So if you notice, it's in this top right corner. By adding this margin, what it's saying is, I have my header area. I want everything around it to be 50 pixels away. Okay, that's what our margin represents. The next thing that we're going to add is padding. Okay, padding, and I'm going to do 50 pixels again. Okay, as we saw it jump, it moved our text away from the border. Okay, so this is our border. And padding allows us to have some type of padding in between our border and the text that's in it. So let's delete this so I can just show you what that looks like. By adding padding, we're just moving that text inwards. Okay, so by manipulating our margin and our padding, we can start to really create custom styles, move things around, and things like that. The next thing that I really wanted to focus on is talking about the borders. Now, a lot of times we're not going to be messing with the border colors or things like that, but it is good for you to know. Just in current design, that's not something that we tend to do a lot, but let's just talk about it real quick. And I'm also going to show you some aspects in our properties panel. Okay, so if you remember when we were over in our CSS designer, I can work with a ton of my different properties. And when I show set, it shows me, here's my margin for 50 pixels. I can then make this a 75 pixels and it's going to update. And it updated that for all of them. And you see there's a link. If you wanted to have custom margins, you could make it 25. Oh, 225, that's a lot. But 25 pixels per se. And you can mess with your custom margins and padding and things like that there. I'm just going to move this back to my 50 pixels all the way around. There we go. So we're back at the one area. So when we're working with these, what you always want to do is click on the selector that you are currently working with. And when I have show set, it shows me the things that are already set. Perhaps I have forgotten a piece of code or I want to explore something in more areas. The layout refers to the layout on the page, the width, the height, the minimum widths and minimum heights. And we'll talk about that more when we get to responsive. But what that means is on my website, the smallest that it's ever going to be is this size. There are also going to be some other codes for display and box sizing, and your book does a really great job of walking you through each of what these codes mean, okay? There are tons out there. We can also relate to the text. We see that my text, my foreground color is set to white. We could also have text align if I wanted to make it center or left aligned or whatever it might be. And you can deal with those. Our text decoration, we have none. If we didn't want an underline, we could always make it underlined, overlined, strike through, whatever you want to work with. But here's our text right here. I don't have any text decoration on here. So another attribute that I wanted to discuss with you was working with your border. And so by clicking on border, and if you hover over these, each of them will tell you what it is. But I've clicked on my border, and let's just pretend I wanted to create a border color. What you would need to say is how big you wanted your size to be. Do you want it to be dotted, dash, groove, whatever it might be. Let's just say I wanted to make a crazy dotted border with red on there. But you can use over here, if it's something that you don't commonly use or you want to explore different facets, these are ways that you can add things like our borders. One time or a couple times that you might use a border is perhaps if you were creating a button and you wanted to create a nice little border around it so it pops out for the reader, etc. For this example, I'm going to remove this, and it's pretty easy to remove in your CSS designer, but what you can do is just click on your trash can and it'll delete those styles that you had applied. So in this example, if we went back to the class website, what you might have noticed or on right here is that your header had a curved border. And that's how we just add this is we can either do it over here, working with the border radius in this way, or we can type this into our code. And as we know, Dreamweaver will start helping you to populate some of the code that's there. And I'm just going to set a border radius of 50 pixels. And as you noticed, then we have this very rounded border that is right there. All right, so we have this beautiful header that's right here. The next thing that we wanted to create are various different sections and create one section, a second section, and then a third section. And we're going to walk through how to do each of these on an individual moment. A section just refers to what you might think a section is. It helps to divide our content on our site. So if I was to just go to the class website, let me just pull up another example. I have my header that's here, this about section, a materials section, and then a resources section. So it just helps us to break down our website and help us to organize our content in that type of way. But we're going to start with creating a section, we're going to style it, and then we're going to start putting new things inside of it, okay? So we are going to go back to our source code, and very similarly to how we created the header, is we are going to make a section, okay? And what we are going to add is just example section 1 and 50 lorem ipsum, or 50 characters. So to do that, our H1, example section 01, okay, and it starts to populate. And then I'm going to add lorem 50, press tab, and then it populates some text, okay? So as I've clicked on this, what it says is section. It says everything within this area is within this section. So let's go ahead and add some styles, okay, to help us to manipulate this a little bit more. We've kind of already walked through some of these, but I'm going to do our section and have it a background color of 038C8C. Okay, and it's a nice little turquoise. We're going to have a foreground color or a text color of white. Add some padding. Okay, and what we see here is that we have just our text that is away from the side of it. So we've added our section. This again is just an area within our website that is just a section of it. It could be an example, it could be a place to put photos, it could be wherever it might be, but it's just a section in your website. What we're noticing on this example is then I have basically boxes within boxes. So let's talk about how to create these boxes within boxes. So how we do that, okay, going back to our source code, all right, is that when I am within my section, so if I click on this HTML code for this box, I'm going to go after my text, but I'm going to be able to create a box within it by placing my cursor in between the section and section and writing what we call div. And a div just means there is a division. That's just a specific division within our site. Very similar to working with all of our sections, they all behave the same way. I'm going to create a heading 1 of example div 01. And then I am going to create some paragraph text. I'm going to say like norm 25. And then it populates some words. So you might be asking next, how can I go ahead and style this? So let's go to our style sheets. Okay. And let's create styles for our div. So you would just do div with our little bracket, curly bracket things, our background color, and I'm going to give it a background color of, actually it was white. Okay, our color, or our text color of black, okay, and then some padding. Okay, and then what we're able to see is that within this box, okay, I have another box. Now what's really interesting is you'll notice there's this padding from our example section that it said everything within it is going to be kind of aligned on this 50 pixels, so it shrinks it in. So that's how we're able to add boxes and things like that. So let's go ahead and do this again. We're going to create a second div within there. So you can put as many different subsections or subdivs or sub areas into your website. So I'm going to come right underneath my div right here. I'm going to click div. Okay. I'm going to make some paragraph text. Example div 02. Some paragraph 25. And all right, what I see is I have 2 divs in there. Okay, so what we're going to notice on our ending site is that our example div 1 is in white and our example div 2 is in this bright orange color. And so you might be asking yourself, how do I go ahead and make these customized styles for each of these things? So what we're going to do is create what they call an ID. An ID is just a piece of code that helps us, as it's written on the sheet, helps us to say that this individual area is different from all the rest. There are a couple of rules about IDs. First, you can only use an ID once on the page, okay? So it says only this area is going to be this difference, okay? So what we're gonna do is go ahead and create an ID to add to our site. Let me go over here. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. First, I've clicked on my box, okay, of this example div 2, and you're gonna notice that this blue button has kind of popped up with this plus button. And so you can click here and it asks you class or ID, and we'll talk about classes in a minute. And what you can write is examples, okay, and it goes ahead and says, where do you wanna do this, et cetera, et cetera. Or you'll also notice that it has been written in this code, okay? And so you can click here, and I'm just gonna delete this to demonstrate, is I can do ID, and it'll start populating things, and I'm gonna write out examples, okay? And then when I go to my style sheet, if I use that plus button at top, it has already populated this ID for us. And so what we're just going to add is a background color of F26D3D, with our semicolon, and then we have very much customize what we have created here. Okay, so in this part of the tutorial, what we are going to be visiting about is adding multiple divs again. So in this case, we're going to add 3 and creating what we call classes. A class is an element that you can apply multiple times to your website. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is telling 3 of our divs we want them to be this purplish, reddish color, okay? And that we want them to have specific styling elements. So what we're going to do, come back over to our site that we've been working on, and you're going to make a section, all right? And then within your section, you're going to create 3 divs. And within those divs, I'm just going to add some paragraph text so we can kind of see how it works with some paragraph text. I'm going to add some lorem ipsum of 15 for each of these. Okay, and as you can see, it's starting to populate. And okay, so right now our divs are pretty much how we had them the first time, okay? And what I mean by that is if I scrolled up to this one, there's no individual styling to it, etc. The first thing that we're going to do is add some properties to our section. And so what we're first going to do is add an ID to our section. We want this section to be different than all of the other sections. And so to do that, we can just do our ID, and I'm going to name it content. Okay. And in our style sheet, what we're going to add are just some values to help it to make sense of each other. In our worksheet, what we're seeing is that there's an overflow, we're going to add a height, and then we're going to add some margin as well just to help differentiate this section from the other ones. Overflow just means it's okay for our boxes to overflow, and I'll show you why that's important in a second. We're going to add some height as well so that we know that our document is stretched, or this box can go the maximum amount of height, okay? So in here, what we're going to create is an ID of our styles of overflow, auto, height is 100%, which just means that it can take on all of the things within there. And then we're just going to add some margin to differentiate it from everything else, okay? So in our file, what we saw that it kind of shrunk a little bit because of that extra margin on there, but that this box is filling with it. So like I said, what we're going to create are these classes, and classes just mean that our red styles and our white text are going to show up on everything. We're also going to set specific widths and height to make sure that it encloses all of our text and all of our information. So to be able to style these, what we need to do is add a column. There's a couple ways we can come up here and type up column, and columns always start with period, okay? And I can select it to my style sheet, or I can go ahead and just manually type it into our code. So you're gonna add column to each of these, okay? And then in our style sheet, what we're going to tell the column to do is we're going to have it take on our color, our background color, I should say, of this, whatever colors you guys really want to make it, but I'm going to use my red. I'm going to make it have a white color. And then what we need to do next is start working on manipulating our width. And honestly, this is really math, okay? What you need to look at is how wide is your areas and things like that. And we'll play around in a second with the width and kind of demonstrate what I mean by that. I'm gonna make it have a height of 100%, or that way it all has the same height. And then I'm gonna say float left. And that just makes it, and you just saw how they went from a single column like this to all right next to each other. And I'm also going to add some margin just to differentiate this content together. Okay, so what we have done by adding this float and kind of working with our width, and I'm going to demonstrate right here how just messing with our width, it's going to push them across. So if we think about like if something is, I mean, our total width is 100%, but with our margin and with our padding and all these things, you kind of have to play around with your width to know where and what works best for your document. And what I found was 20% was about this area for our 3 columns. So it's kind of a little bit of math. It's a little bit of playing around to be able to achieve the shape and the style that you would like to have it as appear as. Okay, so let's take a look at our site so far. We have our header, we have this section with 2 divs in it, we have this section with multiple divs in it, etc., etc. What we are then going to create, I'm going to go to our box model example, is a section that has a background image, okay? This just helps us to say that if you wanted a background image, that you could put a background image within your box. So instead of just like inserting an image, you wanted your image to stretch the whole width of the website. So let's go ahead and do that. So how you do this, okay, is you're going to create a new section. This is kind of getting arbitrary now. And as we know, we had already stylized this section. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add an ID. And remember, an ID is just a specific area on the site that we want the site to look like. And in this case, we want it to have a photo background. So I'm just going to create an ID of photo. These names for the ID are up to you. They're arbitrary. I just know in my head that I want it to be a photo. And so when I come into my style sheet, okay, so to be able to stylize this, what we're going to do is add a style for our photo ID, okay, in our CSS Designer. So I'm actually going to come over to CSS Designer because it works a little bit better over here. But I'm going to click on background. So we have our layout, our text, our borders. Now we're going to click on background. Okay. So instead of working on our background color, what I'm going to do is enter a URL. Okay. So you can either type something in right here or just go ahead and click browse and click on the photo and click open. All right. And it automatically populates your background image. Okay. So we have our background image in here. Some other things that we will want to play with are making sure that our photo is fitting in here properly. So making sure that we're on our border, we want to make sure that we always set our border size to cover. And what that means is your photo covers the width of the section that you have created. You'll also notice that mine is starting to, it just cuts it off. And so you're going to have to play around with your height. And sometimes it's going back and looking at the size of your image, but I just said 500 pixels. You could also set it at 250 pixels. And you're basically saying how many pixels you want your image to be. So in this case, I've created a background image with a background size of cover with a height of 250 pixels. The last thing that we are going to add to basically the structure of our website is what we call the footer. And on this example, I've set a footer of contact us and some lorem ipsum that's there. And the footer is just an area, okay, where you can add contact information, your emails, whatever it might be, your copyright, but it's just the end of your website. So let's go over to our index.html, or I'm sure you're still on yours, but I'm going to go over there. And what I'm going to do is you're going to type in the component of footer. Okay, and I'm going to add some ipsum, well, heading 1 of contact us. Okay, and then I'm going to add some paragraph text. Let's add like 20 pixels or 20 words. Okay, so in there I have some contact us, etc. Just like always, what we're going to have to do is go into our styles.css and stylize it. So to do that, what I'm going to just type is footer I'm going to add some background color. Add a foreground color. And then I'm going to add some text align. And so text align is what we might think. It just allows us to say, let's center our text. And so you can have it left aligned, right aligned, center, whatever you might be. The standard is left aligned. So I'm just going to make my text align to center. I'm also going to add just a little bit of padding just to make it look a little bit nicer and pushed away from each other through that way. But now we have our footer. All right, so the next component that we're going to talk about is your navigation. And up here on the top, what you can see on my final example is I have some navigation, and what you can do is you can click on it and it goes to specific areas within the site, etc. So let's talk about how we put this all together. All right, so let's go over to our code. The first thing that you need to know about navigation, and the reason why we had to put our navigation in last week's example in a list, is because navigation is really just a list of elements. So we're going to click and go to the top of our page, okay, above our header, and I'm going to add some space just so I have some room to work with. And we're going to add an area for our navigation. We're just going to call this nav. Okay, and that is the standardized code for how we create our navigation. A navigation, as I said, is a list, okay? And to create our list, we're going to create an unordered list. So UL, not OL. So an unordered list, and we're going to create list items for the following. First, we're going to have home. We're going to have LI for about us. Okay. We're going to have an LI for content. And these are just our headers. And what is going to appear in our navigation. Photo. And finally, contacts. Okay. So as I click on here, what it will do in a second. Okay, is it added these bullet points. Now, we're like, well, that looks silly. Okay, let's first make our links, and then we're going to show you, or I'm going to show you, how to really work on stylizing these so it looks more like a navigation. So to add links to our internal areas of our site, we had talked about how an ID is a reference to one thing on your page. This also allows us to link to that specific area on our page, okay? So let's just do the example of content because it already has an ID on it. And if we remember down in our content section, as I click on it, okay, it has this ID of content. Okay, so let me scroll back up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to link this content to content. Okay, and so you're going to use a hashtag that represents that there is a link somewhere. Okay, and when that is in there and the link is added, it'll go blue. And let's open this up in our preview. Yeah, save changes. Yeah. Okay, and when I click on content, it automatically scrolls down to there. So what we need to do is to add IDs to the rest of the things that are on here. That way our site knows where to go. Okay, so for about us, we could just make it this, first section. Okay, and I can add an ID right here and just name it about. Okay, and then as I scroll down, this one already has an ID of content. This one already had our ID of photo. And then our footer section, we're just going to add contact. So when we come back up here, we're all the way to the top. I'm going to add links for each of these. We'll talk about home in a second. Let's do our about us. And so we need to link it to and highlight those words. We're going to link it to about. Okay, and then we're going to link it to photo. And then we're going to link it to content. Okay. And so when we've come here, when I click on about us, it goes there, content, it'll go there, photo, it'll go there, contact, it'll go there. For home, you can do a couple of things. The great thing about home on this example is just your page, and you can just put a placeholder, which your placeholder is just the hashtag. And that just means that when you click it, it stays on the page that you are at. And so we're just going to do that for right now. Okay, so we're still not very happy with our header. It looks very generic. It looks like just a bulleted list of links. And so let's go ahead and start stylizing our navigation. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to type in nav. Now, what we are specifically talking about is our nav list. Okay, so let's pull up this style or the sheet to help us with this. Okay, but what we have to do is tell it within the navigation, we only want our links to look this way. And so how you do that is you say nav, and then you add li. Okay, so that means my list, only my nav lists are going to look this way. So if you had a variety of different lists on your website, if you just put li, it would stylize those lists that way. Okay, so I'm going to click nav li, and then I'm going to have it display. And display, okay, it's just a way of showing it how it's going to look. And what we're going to tell it is inline, all right? And that just means that they are in line with each other. I'm going to just add some margins to make it look a little better, okay? And then you can add some margin, you know, or padding or whatever you wanted to work with, okay? But this just allows us to make it look a little nicer, not necessarily anything crazy going on there, but I'm just going to add some margin, just some playing around with how I want it to look, how I want it to be stylized. I'm going to just stick on 50 pixels for right now. But as we can see, okay, we have a navigation. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but we have played with some navigation, made it inline. All right. Now, when I am working with my navigation and I want to maybe make these not blue, I don't want them to be underlined, etc. What we're going to have to tell it are only the nav links. So very similar to what we just did. Nav a link, okay, and I'm going to have nav a visited. I want them to not have an underline. Okay, and I want them to have a color of 590C0C. So it's that red color. So mine didn't work, as we could see, and this is why code is really particular. You see this little space? Don't make a space, okay? So you have to be very careful on how you're putting your things together. But when I remove that space, it updates. We see that it's that red color, and then I'm just gonna add one for my nav hover. So when I hover over something, okay, I want it to be a color of 026873. Okay, now we have our customized box model. We worked with some links, we worked with our navigation, etc., etc. Okay, now this site really just helps us to demonstrate how the box model works. It's not the most prettiest thing, but what you guys are going to be doing is working on creating a customized static site in this type of regard. There are things that you might want to do that I did not teach you in this tutorial. This is just a general demonstration of how the box model works. Use your textbook, use the code from there. And also Google. Google is a great, great friend. And on the class website, and I know I always come back to the class website, but there's a lot of resources on how to find things. One of the best tools that web designers have is, let me see, general help. There's one called W3 Schools that I've linked to, and it's
amazing. Okay, they have HTML, they have CSS, and they have HTML formatting. And so like, let's say I wanted to find some information, like I still don't understand IDs, come to the IDs. Okay. And it gives great information on how to work with it. It gives example code, etc. Let's say that I wanted to add, some media, or if I wanted to add, examples or exercises or whatever it might be. There's really great tools on this website to help you and to help you learn more about specific things that you might want to do, because what you might want to do might be different than what I might want to do. Okay. I can help you to do those things, but use the resources that are out there. If you don't know how to do something, be a critical thinker and use Google, and then I can help you. There's also a really nice one here as well about the box model as well. So this is just a great resource for you to use and to help you. And like, here's a navigation bar. It gives you more about like, how do I create a navigation bar? It gives you exact code for how to do this. Okay. Which is really interesting. Another thing is, with code, there are going to be some various different ways to do something. Okay. So even though, adding 10 pixels of margin does something, maybe there's another piece of code that does that. And so you need to be a critical thinker with yourself to help you to get through your website. That's my spiel. There you go.